everybody. My name is Matthew Fleming, and I'm an editor here on NOVAsia. Today we have a great podcast where we're going to be talking about Switzerland and some guests as well as editors, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves.
My name is Simon. I'm a student here at Yonsei. I'm Swiss, and I'm here on an exchange program from a Swiss university.
My name is Celine. Hi, everyone. I'm also Swiss, and I'm a fourth semester at Yonsei.
Well, I'm Leslie. I'm an editor here at NOVAsia, so I'm interested to learn more.
So if you guys just want to start off, I guess, like, what brought you to Korea then? Like, why Yonsei? Why Korea?
So for me personally, it's quite straightforward because I have an exchange program from my home university, which is with Yonsei University, which is a double degree master's program. So I get 2 master's degrees in 2 years, and I spend 1 year each at my home university and then 1 year in Korea. And I chose Korea. I had a couple of options for universities, but I chose Korea because to me it felt the most interesting culturally, but also since I study international relations, I thought Korea was very interesting in that regard too.
Okay. Makes sense.
For me, it was kind of similar in a way of I just wanted, since I later, if I work, I kind of want to focus on the Asian region. So I thought, okay, I want to do my master's in Asia. So Korea was kind of like closest in choice because I knew already some friends, which I met during language days abroad. So I was like, okay, that's helpful since I don't know the language. They can help me if I have an emergency. So yeah, that's kind of why.
Do you think that, like, in Switzerland there's like this interest in Korea, or do you guys think that's more of like a outside kind of view?
I think Switzerland is not really. I think the interest in Asia and Korea maybe specifically is growing. We have a lot of tourists, mostly from Asia. That's, I think, our main connection. But I think, well, when I told people that I would go here, a lot of people asked why, or just didn't know much about the country. So I think maybe it's coming, but it's certainly not like there's this huge trend right now, I think.
I would agree. It's kind of, I feel Switzerland is still more with Japan in a sense, also because of economic relations and stuff. But I feel also sometimes on social media and stuff, you see more now because of BTS. So it feels like even in Switzerland, it kind of reached now. So
the global influence of K-pop.
exactly, like they came over the mountains and it came to Switzerland. So yeah.
But it's not quite at the same level as perhaps the US. That kind of
No, definitely not.
I don't think I have
Right.
many friends who listen to K-pop
No.
in Switzerland. Yeah.
I feel around it's more dominant, like Germany, England, they're more. Switzerland is still very.
Do you think like Korean, like the K culture that is marketed abroad or that has found like resonance abroad, do you think it'll become more popular in Switzerland, or can you really know, or do you think, no, we're not really interested?
I personally don't think it would become as popular as in other countries. Maybe for the younger generations, but in general, not that much, I think.
Yeah, because I think it's similar. I don't know if it's Switzerland specific, but also American influences, I think, are stronger in other European countries than they are in Switzerland. Like in popular culture, I think we're not as US centric as other countries.
Everyone really sees Switzerland as kind of like a really globalized place, and kind of like world reaching, which is that something that you guys kind of like feel as well, that like Switzerland is like one of those countries that's really globalized focused, or do you think more internally? Because I feel like a lot of times it can be like one way out, where Switzerland seems to have like a big focus on the world, while like not a lot of people seem to be focusing on Switzerland as much.
I would, from personal experience, maybe you can add something different after. But usually when you say, oh, I'm from Switzerland, they either know it because they've been there, but then they only know about the parts which are kind of like touristic, like in like attention in that kind of like international. Where Interlaken, it's with the Jungfraujoch, the top of Europe and stuff like that. But that's only the cities that are very in tourism. So the rest of it, not really. And that's why if they never heard of it, they confuse it with Sweden or.
Why did they confuse it with Sweden? It's just the names, or?
But I mean, I
so.
don't know. For me personally, Switzerland and Sweden.
I know that it's very close in other
Just stop at the
languages.
first letter.
Yeah.
Yeah, like in Spanish, the names are very similar. I think in Japanese as well.
Also, I feel like it's kind of like the war part, maybe.
Maybe
That
neutrality.
Sweden, yeah, exactly.
Snow.
snow,
Mm.
blonde, whatever. I don't know. I don't
Okay.
know, but yeah, it's either they know it or they don't.
I think from I think people here might have a very there are probably two aspects of Switzerland that people might know about, and it's first of all the role of Switzerland in the international community as this hub of international organizations and neutrality and all that stuff, and then the tourism, as you said. But I think, maybe Switzerland, its relationship with the EU, for example, I think that would probably not be something that a lot of people know about outside of Europe, I think. Yeah, because we're famously not in the EU. One of the few countries who aren't. So that always leads to interesting debates. There's one going on currently about, we have bilateral negotiations with the EU always, and that's always a hot issue.
Yeah, I would say it's like, maybe you agree. Even if you're not in the EU, you're not completely not in the EU.
Yeah.
So it's like, I feel maybe it would be different if we actually would be a much, much bigger country. But because we're so small and we're dependent on our neighbor countries in a way, also economic-wise, so they can kind of like use that to pressure us into some stuff, which we are kind of like not
see.
really.
Everything's kind of connected.
I think there's a very fun fact. Well, fun. It's a fact. Switzerland joined the UN in 2002, which is 10 years after North Korea.
Okay.
And since then,
Wow.
only countries have joined the UN, which did not exist in 2002 as countries.
That's kind of crazy because like everyone thinks of like since like Switzerland's like the home of the Red Cross and like the neutrality aspect, you would think that they'll be a part of that. But the fact that like a country like North Korea would be a part of it that's kind of like I didn't really know.
I think it was a very narrow decision as well. I think it was a popular referendum. There was a vote on it,
Yeah, I don't think.
and it was not the very like it wasn't a very like it wasn't a landslide decision. It was actually close. I think.
That's crazy.
I have a question about the independence. Is there any particular event or like part of your culture that you can be like, this is why we chose to be more neutral or chose to be more independent than other countries?
So what I know from history is that Switzerland, first of all, it hasn't been a country in the shape that it is in today for a very long time, because we were influenced by different kingdoms or empires like around us in Europe. And Switzerland's history is dominated by Swiss people being mercenaries for other countries. Famously, we still have the Swiss Guard for the Pope in the Vatican. That's the only thing that I think remains today. But Swiss guards were like everywhere in Europe, like the French Revolution and everything. But after that, I think it was early 19th century, when Switzerland was actually recognized by the other European powers as its independent state. That's when it was also recognized as a neutral state, as a buffer kind of between, the French and like
The other
parties.
That's kind of like a little bit of a darker twist on like the story that I've always told, because everyone always talks about the Neutrality Center, International Red Cross, but no one really talks about like the mercenary for a hire aspect.
Switzerland's history is very it was very militaristic until it wasn't. We were like, no one was fighting us. We were just fighting on every side, which I guess you can draw connections to our neutrality during like World War II. We're not fighting ourselves, but we're cooperating with everyone.
I think if I remember correctly, a contributing factor to that is also because we have so many different cantons. So there were also different, kind of like, it's different districts. So it's not that unity back then.
Yeah, I think the independence is actually what kind of became the national identity of Switzerland. Because obviously, we have 4 different national languages. We have different religions mostly between like Catholic and Protestant, I think. And some areas that only joined comparatively recently. But I think the thing that created the Swiss national identity was independence from the foreign influences.
Now you mentioned 4 languages and national, like that. To me, that just blows my mind. So like, how does that work? Like in like a school subject or like just like talking to people in general? Because like I feel like that's something that would maybe foster kind of like divides or like separation from each other.
If I remember it correctly, I'm not sure about the percentage anymore, but about, I think 70 or 80% is actually Swiss German.
Okay.
So since Swiss German is not an official written language, that's why we have German in school. So we learn to write and speak German. So in school, technically, it's compulsory to speak German, or was at least.
No one actually likes to speak German.
No, we would make fun of each other because when we speak German, it's very hard to hide our Swiss accent. So if a Swiss person speaks German, that actually sounds very hilarious, unless they're really good at it. And French is done, I think Swiss German is like 70%.
I think it's like 70, 20,
20 French,
9, 1.
and then
9-1.
Italian,
Like
and 1 is
1% is
Retro
Romansh.
Romansh. Yeah, it's kind of like a dying
dying
out
language.
language.
Still considered a national language?
Yes.
So our, like, for example, there are many public service programs like National News, which are funded by taxes and they have to also provide them in Romansh because it's a national language. And I think those are the efforts
Even
that they
news,
make.
we have a special Romansh
They
news
have-
channel.
Just
They
like
make an
keep it-
effort to actually preserve the language.
That's great.
Absolutely.
So you don't think in the future like Romansh would be something that like slowly dissipates, or do you think the government will slowly start trying to get rid of it?
I feel like it depends on because it's only spoken in the eastern region, right? And I feel it's only the ones that actually live there if they keep it in their families. Because same goes, for example, for Italian. What we learn in school compulsory is French and German and later on English. But Italian is always voluntary. So, but in general, the Italian speaking part is bigger to begin with than the Romansh. So I don't think they will kind of try to preserve it. Like that it increases again at least.
No, I think they will try to preserve it, but I think it'll be difficult to do so because just naturally it's gonna, disappear over time, I think. Because you can't use it anywhere else. It's not like it's a minority language in a country that is spoken somewhere else. It's literally the only place where it's spoken. And even that language in itself has like, I don't know how many dialects, very, very many different
really
dialects as well within that tiny language of like 50,000 people. I don't know.
It's a very small fraction.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I could see how that might be hard to like kind of preserve that. But like, does it have like strong cultural roots to like aspects of what it means to be like Swiss, or is it like kind of like one of those disconnected? Because like, what does it mean to be Swiss? What is Swiss culture?
I honestly feel my answer would probably vary from Simon's answer.
Probably.
Also because we grew up in different cantons. So
Do
I
you want to
really
explain what cantons are real quick? Just in case
so
people don't
cantons
know.
are like
States.
distinct districts or
they're like
provinces
states in the US
in
or-
here in
Yeah.
Korea. So you have like
26.
Yeah. I was like, I had it in my head, but I was like, just confirming quickly. 26. So the Swiss Germans, like each province has a different accent. So if he speaks Swiss German, he sounds very different from one I. And so each canton also has kind of like different traditions and cultural aspects. So that's why I feel his definition would be different from my definition.
It's also very different, like depending on whether you grew up in a city or near a city, than if you grew up in a village somewhere near the Alps. Because obviously places like Zurich are very, very connected with the outside world, other countries internationally, but other smaller villages are like very different culturally.
What would you say like some of the defining characteristics would be of like these areas then, like of people who live like near the mountains, or like defining features like in the city? Like what are like important aspects that like someone who would come in would like recognize?
I think the difference in perspective between more rural areas and urban areas are that the more rural areas have kind of a Switzerland-focused view of Switzerland. So when they think about Switzerland, they think about us, being independent from the EU, for example. That is one big issue. Whereas I think if you go to the cities, people view themselves more as Swiss citizens and Switzerland as part of, the international level. Like So one interesting thing is that around a quarter of the Swiss population is foreign. But obviously that foreign population is centered in cities.
Okay.
So that contributes to the, more multicultural aspect of the urban areas compared to the rural areas where it's still very Swiss, whatever you'd find that as. But,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, that's like in any country. Same in the U.S.
Yeah,
Like I'm from
yeah.
a small town, and like I don't fit what people think an American is like because I haven't been to the big cities that much. So I have a question about what you are most proud of about your country. Do you have anything personally, or you think the country is most proud of?
Maybe direct democracy, semi-direct democracy.
Also, I'm pretty I feel our whole system works pretty well in terms of also law-wise protecting. For an example, employee laws. That's why I feel like, for me, if I can, I want to find a job later in Switzerland, because just having heard from many different people from different cultures made me realize how
what's unique and what's
exactly and the opportunities we actually have, or how good we actually have it. Like, for example, with the 4 weeks vacation minimum, which is regulated by law, is like usually when you hear from other people, it's like 1 or 2 weeks, and I'm like, oh.
That's so nice. Like that sounds so nice to have like that much time baked in, because usually like in the States it's like stuff that you have to accumulate and like earn, like PTO. If you're doing like an hourly wage job, it's like those breaks don't really add up. And then I know don't you guys have like mandatory maternity leave as well for like
yes.
women?
I think
we
we just
voted
introduced
2 weeks.
paternal leave as well.
Yeah.
Wow, that's good.
But a bit shorter than I think a lot of
2
people
weeks.
would have wanted it to be. But
Do you think people will take it? Just a side note, Korea, they don't really take the leave that they're given a lot
think
of
they will.
times.
I feel yes, because we accepted this, so they for sure will, because it's also there right now that they can take it.
There was another vote a couple of years ago. I don't remember which year, but there was a vote about a popular vote about increasing the mandatory minimum holiday weeks per year to 6.
Yep.
And it was rejected.
Yep.
Really?
By the people.
I remember.
So I think, because we're happy with what we have, I think people will probably take that.
Also, I don't know, you voted as well, I guess, back then, right?
Yes.
So, did you vote for it? Or
I think I voted against it.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too. Just interesting. No, because my personal thing is, it's like, when I voted for it, I was also considering, okay, like, what they give me, they some have to get it in somewhere again. So it's kind of like usually when we have votes like that, I tend to think a bit broader. Obviously, it would have been nice 6 weeks, but somewhere the loss needs to get back in, right? So
that's something that I think is really unique about Switzerland, that we have so many popular votes on sometimes very complicated issues. Like 2 or 3 weeks ago, we had the latest votes. A couple of weeks ago. One of them was about a free trade agreement with Indonesia.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
that was a popular vote.
Yeah, it was a popular vote.
Huh.
And most people obviously don't read the text. Like I don't either. So I think something else that makes the system work is that Swiss people, and this is also something that I would think that I'm proud of, is that Swiss people have a lot of trust in the government. Like we get opinion. Like whenever we vote, we get a booklet.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted
with
to say
opinions by the federal government, by the opposing committee.
Exactly. So and the very detailed description, which I think usually not every country has that. So you literally get like a booklet where just everything is described and in detail and what they would propose and recommend.
That's a really interesting way to like keep the populace like educated, I guess, in like some of these complicated ideas. But I guess you really have to be able to depend on like non-biased info inside of the booklets.
Yeah, so there's a lot of trust that would have to go into that for sure, but it's necessary. Like the government that you have in place, you should be able to trust it.
That's really cool.
Sometimes it makes you think like, oh, is this an issue that I really want the people to vote about? Because I think most people, will probably follow party lines and not really actually engage with the topic. But on the other hand, who who is going to decide what people are educated enough to vote on, right?
That's true. Like, where do you draw the...
Yeah, where
A
do you
whole
draw-
nother debate about where do you draw the line of education.
Philosophical debates.
Yeah, honestly.
Sometimes it's almost too much what we vote for. Do you remember that one vote where we had to vote whether or not we want to cut off the horns of the cows?
Yes,
That was so.
that's recently too, like a year ago.
No, it's longer.
Is it?
Yeah,
Okay.
because
Why
I
would you
remember
cut
I
the
was
horns
still
off
in
the cows?
Switzerland.
Please explain.
Yeah, why are we cutting the horns off cows?
We're proud of our cows.
Yes.
Okay.
Which we should be.
We take pride.
I think
Understandable.
Good
traditionally,
milk. Good
tradition-
milk.
traditionally, farmers. So cows with horns
Mm.
is obviously nice because it's natural and
Exactly.
Okay, yeah.
But for farmers, I think it creates problems because they can
Okay.
injure each other and
Ooh.
Also space.
yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I think, if I remember correctly, it was about whether the government should subsidize farmers who want to keep the horns, or was that a different thing?
I don't remember the details anymore. I just knew
Yeah,
that
but I mean,
it was about
it's a
cutting
very-
off the horns
It-
or
it's
not.
kind of like-
Niche,
yeah.
very
Yeah,
specific
yeah,
thing,
exactly.
It is a very specific.
Exactly.
With some explanation, I'm like, okay, it kind of makes more sense. But
right? But still, like
Still,
the
it's
entire
very-
8 million people got to vote on it.
Exactly.
Huh.
Like I have no stake in that argument, right?
Yeah, that seems like an interesting way to do it.
It's kind of like, do I like cows? Do I not like cows? Because there's no political stuff in it. It's literally just, do I care? Do I not care? Whatever.
That's also maybe goes into the same aspect as trust in the government. But I think what's also really important is that we have a lot of different parties that form a government. So our government, we don't have a president. Well,
Exactly.
we have one, but he doesn't really have any powers.
Okay, so what is the government in Swiss? So people know.
Well, we have technically, instead of one, we have like 7.
oh,
Okay.
And they're usually from 4 parties, 5? 4 or 5.
Ik geloof beter pizza.
Yeah, like 4 or 5 parties make up the 7 seats in the executive government. And they basically work out a consensus, and that is the federal government's opinion.
Okay.
And I think the fact that we have so many different parties that are involved in, the executive and in government, we don't have majority parties and then opposition parties, makes following party lines easier because it's much easier to find a party that closer aligns with your views, rather than when you compare it, for example, to the US, where
It's like,
realistically you
this is-
have 2 choices.
yeah, sure.
I mean, it also works like we vote cantonal votes for the Federal Assembly, and the Federal Assembly in the end votes the 7. We don't have a say in who the 7 are gonna be, but we can vote
Yeah,
in
we
who
vote
the
for
people
state
that vote
representatives
for
who
the
then
7
vote.
will be. Exactly.
for the president. For the
And the president
Exactly.
just rotates every year.
Exactly.
Huh.
And each of the 7 has a different department they cover, and that rotates as well.
That's just an interesting way to like break up the government. Is there other countries that have a
I
similar
don't think
makeup?
so, actually.
Because that sounds like a really unique
I know that
way.
in a lot of countries, parties have to make coalitions.
Huh.
But I mean, that doesn't really exist here. It's just there are multiple parties no matter how you do it. You don't need a majority for anything.
No. You said you have good cows, which means
I love
good
that segue.
milk.
That's great.
So chocolate. So it's like milk, good cows goes to milk, goes to chocolate. So it's Swiss chocolate, right?
Ironically, milk chocolate is the worst kind of chocolate.
I disagree.
But to
It's
be
dark,
fair,
that's right.
I don't know. Actually, also my Korean friend, she came to visit me once, and
Oh.
she was like drinking our milk, and she was like, "Wow, your milk is so much better than what we can buy."
Really?
Oh, I feel it's because our cows actually go to the Alps, and that makes the milk different from.
Do you think the Swiss, like the Alps, like the climate and like the environment changes the milk, or they're just
Just,
really
like,
happy to
fact
be on the Alps?
Free roaming,
Yeah.
Oh, it's just
mostly.
free roaming in
Yeah.
general. Okay.
Not always, obviously. But
Yeah.
often, yeah.
Do you want to go into like the history of chocolate, like for Swiss?
Oh, I don't
Because
even know
feel like
much
it's
about it,
important.
I don't know what about the history of chocolate either. Actually,
It's a really interesting question. I don't know why Switzerland became, it's not like we have the cocoa plants, beans,
Yeah,
whatever,
also,
in
yeah.
Switzerland. They're all important, so I don't know why it's developed that way.
Huh.
I
It's
have
interesting
no.
though.
Actually, that's a very good question because I don't know much about Why?
I remember there was when I was in elementary school,
Hmm.
we had a class that was like nature and I don't know. It was like a mixed topics class, and one of the topics that we had for like half a semester was chocolate.
Really? It was in your class?
So we like
Like half a
learned how
semester.
it's made, the different stages.
Oh.
That's cool though.
Yeah. But I don't remember much because it was like 10 years ago, 15 years ago.
Yeah,
It
that's
didn't
fair.
stick.
That's
No,
fair.
no. I stick to consuming
I
chocolate.
I know.
think that's the best part of the
Yeah.
deal.
We are the country who consumes the most chocolate in the
Yeah.
world.
Wow.
Really?
I think it's like
Do we consume more
13.
than the Belgians?
I think it's like 13
Oh, no.
kilos per
A
person
war
per
in the
year.
comments.
Something like
Yeah,
that.
I think you actually had it in the notes.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
You
How
guys,
did you remember?
you do. From whatever I read, you guys ate the most chocolate.
I mean,
from whatever I
to
saw.
be fair, we also have like Swiss chocolate brands that are only in Switzerland, available in Switzerland.
So it's
So,
like exclusive to Switzerland.
Well, in my opinion,
Frey, for example.
my personal taste, my favorite chocolatier are really small ones, like family traditional ones, not the ones that are exported.
That's the ones that stay within the country.
Yeah, like the smaller ones usually make, in my opinion, the best chocolates. Which chocolates do you know that are Swiss? I'm curious.
Oh God, no. Only the ones that you took me to.
Oh, okay. So
But I'm sure Lindt.
But
Lint
name
is
someone and
probably
I'll let you know if. Okay, start listing some and we'll see if I know them.
I think the most famous one would be Lindt,
Yeah.
Ah, I know that.
Toblerone.
Okay, no,
Yeah.
Toblerone I know. I don't
I
think
mean,
it's good though.
Ledov is actually now
Ledov is-
expanding to
yeah.
America as well.
That's
and
the one that
others.
has, I think, 2 cafes in Seoul.
Yeah, I think it's only one now.
Wasn't
Maybe
there
you're
another one
right.
at
I don't know. I only
We should have done the
always went
podcast
to-
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually.
Maybe
Tasting
Kaye.
contest.
Kaye, maybe? I don't know.
Is Gaia? I don't think Gaia is
Does it export?
international.
I don't know.
I knew the first two, so that's good.
Hmm.
2 out
I
of
only know Toblerone.
Yeah.
Because it's like, it hurts my mouth when I eat it. Because like,
That's the
I
proper
We're
way
trying
to
it.
eat
to support the country. so.
Okay, which way are you supposed to eat it? Do you break it off, or do you put the whole thing and you bite it off?
I mean, it depends what you like. If you like pain, you bite it off.
Okay.
If you don't like pain, you break
I
it.
bite it
Might
off.
shake the camera.
Okay,
But
thank you.
I do get hurt every time.
Exactly.
But there's the small version and the big version, right?
Yeah.
The small version doesn't hurt.
I
Otherwise,
only
you're
buy the
doing
big
something
version.
wrong.
I
Like
don't
a-
The
remember.
small
Sure,
is so
something
small.
I
So
don't
Toblerone
really
is
eat
like,
it.
it has like these
To
little
be fair,
triangles
me
all
neither.
down it.
Mm.
We have more different kind of flavors of Toblerone though in Switzerland than internationally available.
Well, I would assume since it came from you. you
But
have, like,
Swiss
your own.
people usually don't eat
Oh
Toblerone
yeah, it's
a
really
lot.
spiky.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the
Yeah.
shape of the Matterhorn mountain.
You can see it
I
actually
Oh,
on
yeah.
the.
Is that actually what it's supposed to be designed after?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The mountain
Ah,
mountains.
yeah. I've never actually
It's
had these. but I've
one
seen
very
them in
specific
stores.
mountain that is very famous.
Why is it famous? I don't know.
Because it's pretty.
'Cause it's
Okay.
pretty.
You know, irony as a Swiss, I've never been there yet.
I've
Do
been
you
there
know-
once.
is that like common? Do like Swiss people usually go up to like the actual
Yeah.
Swiss, like the Alps?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
very
Yeah.
often. Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
say like hiking is kind of like a big cultural thing?
Mm.
or
Yeah,
no?
very much so. Yeah, I think
Oh.
hiking is probably, I don't know, maybe the number one outdoor activity in summer.
Wow.
Obviously, we have skiing in winter, and then I think hiking is replacing skiing in summer.
Mm.
I feel
Those are
especially
mountains.
last year it was booming so much because we couldn't go abroad, so everybody
Oh,
would
true,
stay
true.
at home. So like when you see stories from your friends, everybody went hiking
Mm-hmm.
all the
Oh.
time.
You're like
So-
on your phone, like, oh no.
Yeah, kind of like
Mm.
the nature, the
Oh.
fresh air.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
It's an escape from the city
Exactly.
Mm.
because most of the people in Switzerland live in like there's an area of cities
Oh.
within the I don't know what you call it
Flatter
like
areas.
flat lands I guess,
Mm.
and then in the south are the Alps.
Oh.
So I think very often on weekends people go from the cities to the Alps to go
Oh.
into nature.
And I
That
feel
sounds so nice.
it actually, thinking about it now, it doesn't really matter where you live in Switzerland.
Hmm.
You're always somewhat close
You
to
can
some mountain.
Probably
Really?
always be
Yeah.
at a mountain within 1 hour.
Yes.
Oh, that's so pretty.
Yeah.
So I think, like, I've personally seen on dramas that Switzerland is becoming more, like, Koreans are more interested in Switzerland. At least there was that one drama last year. It was like
look at that.
trash landing on you. So
I have
I'll
no
look at
idea.
them.
I have
Crash
no
landing
idea.
on you. Or I think.
I actually I saw
actually
it
have heard of that.
Feel confident in yourself
Oh,
and your
no,
knowledge.
no.
of your
I
business.
saw that one
Yeah.
too, yeah. But
Do you-
only
Hmm?
I only watched it because it was filmed in Switzerland. part of
Wait, it's part of
Oh,
this
in
film in
Switzerland?
Switzerland.
That's why I was
Like
mentioning it.
one-
Yes.
really?
it.
Yeah.
In Zurich, like
Uh-huh.
on this platform where you can watch down on the river. I don't know. if
Did they
you've been
say it
there,
was
but-
Switzerland, or did they pretend it was Korea still? Like in
No,
the film?
actually
No,
they
it's
said
Switzerland.
it's
They said
Switzerland.
Switzerland.
Yeah, and
Oh.
but again the other, I think it was only these two locations. There was like the hanging bridge somewhere in Bern.
I remember the
I've
bridge.
never been there. And
Um,
but it's again where they film is usually the places that are already very popular in tourism. It's usually not new stuff.
So what's on the underground?
Explain
What are we
it.
what are we missing? What's the spot that we need to go?
the thing is, I think usually there are very similar places, like the
Hmm.
touristy ones that aren't touristy.
Ah, that's good.
But I personally really think something tourists haven't discovered yet is the southern part
Mm.
of Switzerland, which is actually really beautiful.
Yeah.
And not many actually know about this or go there.
Huh.
But it's kind of like since you're going towards Italy, it's becoming more Italian-like.
It's very warm. Like
Yeah.
we have, next to the lakes there are palm trees and everything, and it's always at least, well, not always at least, but like it's usually a good 5 degrees warmer than
Yeah.
the rest of the country.
So a lot of
wow.
Swiss people usually in summer just go down there.
Wait, in summer they go to where it's hotter, like in the south.
I mean, yeah.
Because it's
And you have the lakes you can swim in, or the
Oh.
Valle Verzasca, which is kind of like a river. It's very beautiful.
that's where James Bond
Yeah.
jumped off of a dam into the.
Is Switzerland like a really
Amazing.
popular place for movies to be filmed? Because we already just
There are a
we
couple
just
of-
listed like
There were a couple like James Bond movies. I don't know. That's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah.
Also, in like
No,
the
an
mountain
older
bunkers
one with the-
are often locations for
Switzerland.
movies.
I can see
There was
that,
also
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know which one it was, but it's an older James Bond where they drive up the
Oh yeah, the Gotthard
genau
Pass.
the pass. Yeah. Very random. But
If I can change the subject, I wanted to
Yeah.
ask about COVID-19 in
Mhm.
Switzerland. What is it like? How is it different from your experience here, or just in general? Like, how is it?
So I mean, I moved during COVID
Yeah.
Yeah.
from Switzerland to Korea. I think you were here. You've been here since.
I left in February 2020, so it hasn't
Right,
hit
hasn't started.
Switzerland that hard yet.
yeah.
So I left technically before it
Mm.
came hard. Like hit
So
hard.
I had one online semester of university back home before I came here. It is very different because people have a very different attitude to it, I think. Obviously in Korea, I'm very used to always wearing my mask outside. I don't even think about taking it off.
Right.
And I recently thought about that. When I go home in summer, I won't be expected to wear a mask anymore outside
Are there not that
because
many
people don't wear
cases?
masks outside. It's just like,
But I
It even
it's
took-
compulsory now.
is it?
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know how it is if it's like again cantonal because St. Gallen is compulsory. You actually have to pay a fine if you.
Okay. Well, I know that it took until I think November
It took a while.
to even have mask mandates inside stores.
Huh.
The first thing was only public transportation, and then I think a long time later came stores. I think it just shows that there's not as much of a. I don't know. I think if there's more of a feeling of individual responsibility, maybe.
Interesting.
I mean, I haven't been in Switzerland when it all came down, but when you call home, you hear it from your friends, from your family, and from what I heard or what I read in the news, being here, I must say I feel Switzerland could have done a better job.
Yes.
They did not do well in the whole thing. Also, there was this one point where they just said, well, each canton can decide by itself what they want to do. Where I'm like, for once, just do like a whole Swiss thing. But
I think that ties into what we talked about earlier. Swiss people don't like, top down,
Like
being told what to do
overarching.
because we're very used to having a lot of say in what's going on politically. So in a time, in a crisis situation, emergency situation, where arguably, more authoritarian measures could make sense from a health perspective.
Yeah.
That's a very, risky topic, I guess.
Okay.
I think that's something that like a lot of democracy-centered countries were dealing with, where like in the United States they had like the states governments fighting with the federal governments about overarching. So it's really interesting to have like another example where like not the exact same makeup of a government, but one where like democracy is really strong. It's like having like that overarching policy that you might want for like an emergency action, it's kind of hard to implement.
I think it makes even less sense in this case in Switzerland because obviously the US is huge.
Yeah.
So if you have different, regulations and laws between states, you can still drive 10 hours without the laws changing. Whereas in Switzerland,
True.
if you drive 5 hours, you're in a different country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think based on that, it was also difficult because you would often encounter different regulations, maybe where you live and where you work, or just where you go on a daily basis.
That's interesting that you have such like, I didn't really think about like the scale of the continents, like because like if the country's like the country itself is not that like big geographically, right? And so like to have like these multiple areas where like things can change like that from like your work versus your home, that is really interesting, especially like with a COVID-19 response. Like it's like, oh, I have my mask on halfway on my drive to work, and then once I pass this line, it's like, all right, we're cool. So that is really interesting though.
Yeah. And I think that the lack of a overall comprehensive strategy led probably to confusion and frustration with the people, which then reduced the effectiveness of measures that were taken, I would guess.
I can see that.
Yeah. But I think I would probably say I feel safer in Korea than I would if I were in Switzerland.
Definitely. Because it feels like, as he said, here people also take it more seriously. Like, I don't know, you could say that's just an assumption though, that the whole mask thing is kind of like already in the culture in a sense of when they were sick, right? They would wear masks sometimes. Whereas in the Western culture in general, masks.
People will look at you and think,
what is he
Like, are they dying?
Like, what the hell? What the hell? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I feel that's the difference. But
I do think that's a legitimate difference between them that led to some of like, why am I wearing a mask? That's silly. Okay, so I think we're getting like lower on time. So I had a question I wanted to ask if, and like after you guys have been abroad for a while, I don't know how many times you've been abroad for how long, but does it change your perception of your own country? Like have you, Celine, for instance?
That's a good question.
yeah, definitely. Because one thing I actually really appreciate always when I come back is the clean air.
I think for me, clean air and nature.
Yeah, exactly.
You can be in a city. Obviously, Seoul has, hills and some nature that you can go to if you want to.
Yeah.
But you still feel like you're in a city. Whereas, as we said, in Switzerland, even the cities feel more like being in nature, and then you can take a train 30 minutes and you're completely in nature and no civilization around you, basically. I think I do miss that as well. For me, I like both, the more busy cities like Seoul, which is why I really enjoy being here. But I also need the balancing of,
the mountains,
Yeah.
nature.
Yes. Have you been able to find ways to get out in nature out of Seoul?
I've gone hiking a couple times, and I really enjoy that here. But obviously the mountains can't compare.
Actually, I just wanted to say to you, how do you perceive that experience? What is better, Swiss mountains or this mountain?
Well, I prefer the Swiss mountains.
Well, I mean, the Swiss mountains are like globally recognized. The Alps. Yeah.
I mean,
I want to visit. I've never been anywhere except Korea and my home country. So.
Yeah, I enjoyed that, and also, I'm connected to that point with nature, just it being more quiet.
Yeah.
Even in cities,
Switzerland?
Yeah, because in Switzerland on Sundays everything is closed.
Oh, wow.
Like no stores are open.
Is that a religious thing?
I think originally it was. Yeah.
it was also kind of like to create a possibility for families to actually be together at least one day.
Yeah. And also most shops close at 6 or 7 p.m.
All the time.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh wow.
So when I go back, the first thing that I will have to get used to is
hard.
not being able to order delivery at 2 a.m.
Yeah. I mean, delivery is also not that
Delivery you can
advanced.
forget it.
Wait, really? There's no
Too
delivery?
expensive.
It's
Too
I
expensive.
mean, we have delivery,
Oh.
but don't imagine it as advanced as here.
Oh no. Okay. I think Korea is like one of the most advanced
Yeah.
delivery systems.
It's
Like,
so
good
Canadian.
lord, the amount of
Yeah.
like delivery bikes flying everywhere around you.
I get kind of scared of
Yeah, it's like
Honestly.
should I order food? Will someone die if I order food?
I feel like it's easier to actually in Switzerland. It's easier to order delivery food if you live in a city. As soon as you live in a village a bit outside, it's gonna be much harder. or they have like a very high minimum amount of money you have to order for.
Right.
So it's like, I don't want to eat that much. So
I think usually you have to order for at least $30.
yeah,
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So
Sometimes
forget
40.
single
Otherwise,
by
they won't
yourself.
make the trip. Yeah.
exactly.
Wow.
Maybe it changed now because of COVID. I don't know.
That would be interesting
Yeah,
to
that
look
would be
at
interesting
though,
to see, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because like delivery is like boomed in the
Mm.
States and like in other countries where like everyone's just like ordering food online. now.
Especially since restaurants are not allowed to open. Maybe some of them switch to
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just like
delivery.
making it easy.
Yeah.
Huh.
So you might have more choice now as well. I don't.
It's been about 45 minutes.
Mm.
So,
Yeah,
do we
so
have any closing remarks? Anything you want to add that we haven't covered?
you have 5 minutes. Make your elevator pitch.
The elevator pitch of Switzerland.
The elevator pitch of
Get our
Switzerland.
It's like try our milk.
Alright.
Sold.
Good chocolate, good mountains, nature,
Come for the mountains,
cities.
stay for the chocolate.
Amen.
Or the other way around.
Well, okay. I'll come for the chocolate and stay for the mountains.
Sounds beautiful. Thank you guys for coming. No,
Yes,
it was really
thank you.
good.
Thank
I
you
love
guys
having
for having us.
conversations.
Thank you.
No problem.